Hey everyone, it's your host Ruby, and this video is going to be chapter 15 of The Darkest Minds by Alexandra Bracken. This is going to be a little bit of a longer video, so before all, I would like to please ask you if you could hit that like button, and if you aren't subscribed already, please subscribe. I would truly appreciate that. And now, go ahead, get your snacks, your drinks, sit back and relax, and let's get into chapter 15. As they came closer, I saw their mismatched dark clothes and the grime on their faces. They were all thin limbs and hollow cheeks, as if they had stretched out a great deal in a short period of time. All boys about my age. All easy to take if we had to. Christ on a cracker. The one closest to me muttered, shaking his mop of red hair. I told you we should have checked the van first. Liam's blonde head popped up from the wreckage. What the hell are you fools trying to pull? He snarled. There was another sound too, like the mewling of a cat. Of a kitten, I should say. Or a little girl crying. I climbed over a bin of bargain DVDs to get to them. Zoo sat on the floor, her pink palm facing towards Chubb's squinting eyes. Without the glasses perched on his nose, he looked like a different person. She's all right, he said. No burns. Liam was suddenly standing beside me, using my shoulder for balance as he climbed over one of the overturned shelves. You okay? He asked. Fine, I said. Pissed. You? Fine. Pissed. I thought for sure I was going to have to hold him back as we came closer to the cluster of boys, but his fury seemed to fall away from him with each step. Other kids had regrouped beside an overturned display of neon-colored pool noodles. The tallest one, his cloud of fizzy brown hair hovering over the pencil-thin neck, stepped in front of the others. The ginger kid, who had spoken before, and two big-shouldered blondes that looked like brothers. Look, man, I'm sorry, he said. Do you always do crap like this? Liam said, attacking folks without even checking to see if they're armed, if they're like you? The leader bristled. You could have been skip tracers. And it was your yellow that did all of this. The ginger kid gestured toward the shelves. The girl needs a leash. Watch her mouth. Liam snapped. The blonde brothers took a step forward, their eyes lighting at the challenge. She wouldn't have panicked if you hadn't pulled guns on us. We wouldn't have had to use them if you'd paid attention to our warning back there and just left. Because you gave us so much time to get away, Liam snapped. Look, we could go back and forth forever, and it won't solve a damn thing. I interrupted. We were hoping to spend the night here, but if you've claimed it or whatever, then we'll go. That's the only reason we came, for shelter. For shelter, the leader repeated. I'm sorry, did I stutter? No, but my ears are still bleeding from your yellow's meltdown, he snarled. Maybe you should say it again, baby. For good measure. Liam shot out an arm, cutting off the warpath before it could start. We just want to stay here at night. We're not looking for any trouble, he said flatly. The leader gave me the once-over, his eyes drifting to a stop where my hands were fisted at my side, bunching up my dress. Looks like you already found it. The leader's name was Greg, and he hailed from Mackinsville, Virginia. The nervous ginger-haired kid refused to introduce himself, but was called Collins by the others. I caught that he was from some town in Pennsylvania, but that was as much as he was willing to share with anyone. The blondes, who were, as I guessed, brothers, were Kyle and Kevin. The only thing the ramshackle group had in common, outside of their pool of food and an alarming pile of firearms and knives, was their camp in New York, which they lovingly referred to only as Satan's ass crack. They told the incredible, dramatic, and highly improbable tale of their escape from PSF custody over our shared meal of fruit snacks, stale Pringles, and Twinkies. Let me get this straight, said Chubbs, his face etched with disbelief. You were being moved from one camp to another. Greg leaned back against one of the glass freezer doors. They weren't taking us to another camp. They packed up as many guys as they could and said we were being brought to a testing facility in Maryland. Only guys? Chubbs asked. We didn't have girls there. Greg's voice was heavy with disappointment. That explained a lot, particularly why he still seemed to be inching toward me, no matter how far I scooted away. Otherwise, I'm sure they would have been loaded up too. I'm surprised they even told you that much, I said, trying to steer the conversation back on track. Do you think that's actually where they were bringing you? No, Collins cut in. It was pretty clear that they had orders to get rid of us. And a storm flooded the road, flipping the bus and allowing you to escape. That was the part of the story I had problems with too. It was that easy for them, a simple intervention of Mother Nature, and they were saved, washed out to freedom and a new life, biblical style. Where was the detail of PSFs traveling with them? We've been holed up ever since. It took something like 6 months to get word to my dad that I was out and safe, and another 3 to get some kind of response from him. Chubbs leaned forward. How exactly did you get in touch with them? The internet? Nah, man, Greg said. Against that terrorist business? You can't even search for recipes online without PSFs snooping and breaking down your door. All they need is one whiff of trouble. What terrorists? The League, Chubbs said. Don't you remember? He seemed to realize his mistake a second late, and with more patience than I thought he possessed, explained. 3 years ago, the League hacked into the government's PSI databases and tried posting information about the camps online to everyone to see. Other groups took that as their cue to hack into banks and stock exchange, the State Department, so they cracked down on it. Right. Most of the social networking sites are gone, and all of the emailing services are required to monitor the emails being sent on their servers. He turned to the other boys, who were staring at me with varying degrees of interest and curiosity. I don't think Kyle, or was it Kevin, had stopped staring at me the entire time I had sat there. How then? Easy, Greg said, with a highly unnecessary wink in my direction. We used what was left. I put an ad in my hometown paper with a message only my brother would get. I didn't need to look to know that Chubbs had narrowed his eyes. He tensed beside me. And who paid for this ad? The editors didn't just let you put that in there for free, did they? No, the slip kid paid, Greg said. He set everything up for me. I sat up straight, kicking aside some of the empty foil wrappers. You've been in contact with the slip kid? Oh, yes. He's like a god, Collins said, his breath rushing out. He gathered all of us together, kids from all over New England and the South, every color, older kids, young ones too. They say that the PSFs stay away from his court in the woods because they're afraid of him. That he set his camp on fire and killed all the PSFs sent to bring him back. Who is he? I asked. The four of them grinned at one another, the jumping shadows from the emergency lights making them look even smugger. What else? Chubb said, sucking all of this down eagerly. How was he able to send the money for an ad? What's East River like? Where is it? I glanced back over my shoulder to Liam, who stood behind me, leaning against what used to be a TV dinner freezer. He'd been strangely quiet the entire time, his lips pressed tight together for his face, otherwise perfectly devoid of emotion. They have a sweet setup at East River, Collins said, but if you want to get to East River, you have to find it yourself. Sounds that way, Liam said finally. Are there a lot of kids there? The four of them had to think about this. More than 100, but not like in the thousands, Greg said. Why? Liam shook his head, but I was surprised to see a hint of disappointment there. Just wondering. Most never were in camps, I take it? Some, Greg shrugged. And some found it after dodging skip tracers or PSF custody. And the slip kid, he doesn't have... Liam seemed to struggle to figure out how to answer his question. He doesn't have the plans for them, does he? What's his end game? The others seemed to find the question as strange as I did. It wasn't until Greg said, no end game, just living, I guess, that I realized I hadn't once thought about the reason why Liam would be looking for the slip kid. I just assumed that he and the others wanted to find him to get home and to deliver Jack's letter. But if that really was the case, what had sparked the fire in Liam's eyes? His hands were stuffed in his pockets, but I could see the outline of them curling into fists. What about directions? I asked. Well now. Something changed in Greg's expression. A slick smile took over his face as his free hand landed on my foot. The brothers Kyle and Kevin hadn't said a word since we'd sat down in their makeshift encampment in the freezer aisle, but now looked at each other with identical expressions of knowing. I tried to gulp back the revulsion rising in me. I'm sure they'd be happy to have you, Greg said, his fingers sliding up from my shoe to stroke my ankle. I started to push away, but stopped when he added, It's in a really great location, near the coast, but there just aren't a whole lot of girls. They could use something so nice to look at. His fingers moved again, tracing a line up to my calf. You should go. It's safer than getting caught by one of the tribes. There's a group of blue kids that hangs out around Norfolk. They're nasty. Steal the clothes right off your back. There was a tribe of yellows around here for a while, but a kid we were in camp with claims they were all taken in by PSFs. All of this tribe stuff was new to me. Kids banding together and roving the countryside, trying to avoid getting caught, taking care of one another. Amazing. Greg's warm, fleshy palm continued its ascent until it swallowed up to my knees and squeezed. And that was as far as he was ever going to get. I felt the trickle of my back on my mind, the buzz that pushed past even my anger, and had to close my eyes at the flash of images that followed. A glimpse of a shining yellow shell of a school bus coming close down a dirt road, a woman's blurry face, her mouth moving in a silent song, a campfire flaring up into the night sky, the faces of Kevin and Kyle leaning close to what looked like a clock radio in the middle of a trashed electronics store. The numbers of the clocks facing were climbing, but not counting time. They lit an electric green glow in the dark. 310, 400, 460, 500, until it finally stopped on. My hand clenched into a fist as I started to detach from both Greg and his silky swarm of memories, but Chubbs was already there. He reached across my lap and began to peel Greg's fingers off, one by one, with a look of pure disdain. For his part, Greg only looked slightly dazed, his eyes glassy, unaware of what I had just done. I glanced around wildly, my heart lodged somewhere between my mouth and chest, but no one seemed to have noticed my slip. The only one who moved was Chubbs, and it was just to scoot closer to me. Damn it, I thought, squeezing my eyes shut again. One hand drifted up to press against my forehead, as if I could hold back the invisible fingers there by force. Too close. That was way too close. What was the kid's name again? The yellow who worked with us in the kitchen. Fred? Frank? Collins lay back on his sleeping bag, folding his hands over his chest. Felipe Marino. Greg's eyes came back into full focus and continued up my legs, past where his hand had been allowed. Felipe, Liam interrupted as if coming out of a trance. Did you say Felipe Marco? You know him? Liam added. We traveled together for a while. Must have been before he got his ass caught here, Greg said. He was the one that told us about this place. Said he was here with his friend. That you? Yeah, what happened to him? Liam knelt, wedging himself between Greg and me. They brought us to separate camps. Greg shrugged. He was in one of the earlier buses they were taking to Maryland, who knows. So the yellows at their camp had been removed too. They must have only been taken from the bigger camps, not the smaller ones that had been cobbled together farther west. I missed that kid. He was smart, knew how to use his powers, better than your pet at least. Might as well send her back for all the good she's going to do for you. Greg nodded towards Zoo, who was sitting with her back to us, working through the pages of multiplication problems Liam made for her. And that was about as much as I could take. You have 2 seconds to tell me you're kidding, I said, or I'm going to punch you in the face. Do it, Chubbs hissed beside me. But Liam put a firm hand on my shoulder, effectively shutting down any chance I had to make good on my threat. He kept his face passive, easygoing, but his breath hitched in his throat. He stretched his finger out, brushing them against mine on the floor. I jolted at the touch, but couldn't bring myself to pull away. Greg held up his hands. All I'm saying is, there's something off about her. She's not like the others, is she? He leaned closer. Is she retarded? Do they do testing on her? She's mute, not deaf. Liam cut in smoothly, and I promise you, she's probably 5 times smarter than the 7 of us put together. I'm not so sure about that, Chubbs began. Liam silenced him with a look and brought his lips down next to my ear. Take Sue. I nodded, my fingers tapping his to show that I understood. I pushed myself up off the ground, feeling calmer now. When I reached Zoo, I held out my hand to her. She raised hers without looking, blindly reaching for mine. I stared at the yellow glove in front of me, streaked with dirt and black grime, despite what had happened a few minutes before. Pulled it right off her little fingers. I couldn't say why I had done it. Maybe being so close to Liam and not losing control had made me stupidly brave. Or maybe I was just sick of the reality that forced her into them. All I knew for sure was that if I never saw Zoo wear those gloves again, it would be too soon. Zoo jerked when she felt the warm skin of my hand against hers and tried to tug away. My eyes went wide, but I couldn't tell if it was from worry or wonder. Come on, I said, squeezing her hand. Girl time. Her face brightened up, but she didn't smile. Don't go too far, Liam called after us. Don't go too far, the other boys echoed, then burst out into laughter. Zoo's nose wrinkled in disgust. I know what you mean, I said, and took her as far away from them as I could. For the first 10 minutes or so, we spent walking around the store. Zoo kept turning to look at our linked hands, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Every now and then, some bin of unwanted DVDs or an aisle end cap of pointless knickknacks would catch her attention, but her dark eyes would always wander back to where our hands swung between us. We had just turned down one of many ravaged cleaning supply aisles when she gave my arm a tug. What's wrong? I asked, kicking aside a stray mop. Zoo pointed at the glove I was twirling around with my free hand. I lifted our hands between us. What's so bad about this? She blew out the breath she was holding, and it was evident that I had missed the point. I was dragged all the while to the other aisle, where she let go of my hand to snatch a white box from the shelf. Zoo went to work tearing the box open, tossing aside the foam and plastic stuffing to get the old-fashioned silver toaster inside. I'm not sure we're going to need that. I started slowly. She pinned me with a look that very clearly said, "Quiet, please." Zoo tugged the other glove off her hand and spread all 10 fingers out along either side of the appliance. After a moment, I saw her shut her dark eyes. The metal piping that served as the toaster's innards heated up to a glowing red. A long black cord dangled near her feet, unplugged. The cheap little thing only lasted another minute before its insides started to melt together. I made her put it down at the first sign of smoke. "See?" she seemed to be saying. "Get it?" "But you can't do that to me," I said, reaching for her hand again. "You don't have to worry about hurting me, because you could never." "I know how it feels," is what I really should have been saying. I know what it's like to be scared of what you can barely control. I had forced myself to stop thinking about what I had done to the undercover PSF. I didn't let myself wonder if I could do it again, let alone test it out. But how? I wondered. How were either of us going to learn to control ourselves if we couldn't practice, if we couldn't stretch and test boundaries? "Let's see if we can find something useful," I said, slipping my fingers around her again. I waited until I felt her hand close against mine before leading her back down the aisle. "What do you think?" I'm not even sure what I was supposed to ask her, but she wasn't paying attention to me. Zoo stopped so suddenly and gripped my hand so damn hard that I stumbled back a few steps. My eyes followed the line of her outstretched arm to the appended clothing and shoe racks, more specifically to the lone hot pink dress dangling from an otherwise empty rack. Zoo took off running, blitzing down the aisle of extension cords and buckets. I tried to keep up with her, but it was like the wind had caught her heels and was propelling her forward. She stopped just short of the rack. I watched, fascinated, as one of her hands reached out to stroke the fabric, only to pull back at the last second. "Beautiful," I told her. The dress itself flared out at the waist, with a big ribbon bow at the place where the sleeveless top met the pink and white striped skirt. She looked like she wanted nothing more than to pull it down, hug it to her chest, and press her face against the satiny fabric. I could think about 1,000 things I missed while I was at Thurman, but dresses were not on my list. My dad's favorite story to tell strangers and indulge relatives was the day he and Mom tried to button me up into a blue one for his birthday party when I was 3, because the buttons were so small and impossible for me to reach. I shredded the fabric by hand, bit by gauzy bit. I spent the rest of the party proudly parading around in Batman underwear. Are you going to try it on? I asked. She looked back up at me and shook her head. Her hands dropped from where they were hovering over the plastic hanger shoulders, and it took me a moment to recognize what was happening. Zoo thought she didn't deserve it. She thought it was too nice, too new, too pretty. I felt a sweltering hate rise in me, but I didn't know where to direct it. Her parents for sending her away, her camp, the PSFs. I pulled the dress off the silver rack with one hand and took Zoo's arm. I knew she was looking at me again, her dark eyes wide with confusion. But instead of explaining, instead of trying to force her to understand the words I wanted to say, I led her over to the dressing room in the center of the clothing section, thrust the dress into her hands, and told her to try it on. It was like tugging a boat in the dock on a thin line. The first few times I handed it to her, she would put it down and I'd have to pick it up again. I don't know if her desire finally won out, or if I'd managed to exhaust even her weariness, but by the time she appeared, peeking out from around her dressing room's door, I was so relieved I almost cried. You look amazing. I turned her back around so she could see herself in the room's tall mirror. When I finally coaxed her to look, I felt her shoulders jerk under my hands. Saw her eyes so huge and bright, only to droop again in a moment. Her fingers began to pluck at the fabric. She was shaking her head as if to say, "No, no, I can't." "Why not?" I asked, turning her to look at me. "You like it, right?" She didn't look up, but I saw her nod. "Then what's the problem?" At that, I caught her sneak another look at herself in the corner of the mirror. Her hands were smoothing the fabric of the skirt, and she didn't seem aware of it in the slightest. "That's right," I said. "There is no problem. Let's see what else we can find." After, she wanted to find something for me. Unsurprisingly, the adult section had been decimated by looters. My choices seemed limited to hunting gear and industrial jumpsuits. After several patient explanations about why I didn't need the silky cornflower blue nightgown or the skirt with daisies on it, she, with a total look and complete expiration, accepted that I was only ever going to try on jeans and plain t-shirts. And then she pointed to the bra rack, and a part of me wanted to crawl under the discarded piles of kids' pajamas and die. The letters and numbers might as well have been in Chinese for how much sense I could make of them. And I half expected Zoo to start laughing when the first touch of frustrated tears welled up in my eyes. There were not many times I'd stop and think, I wish Mom were here. I understood now, at least, that what I had done to her, I could never fix. She would have never looked at me again and recognized me, and I would never be able to think of anything other than the look in her eyes when she saw me that morning. It was strange how my feelings about her seemed to change by the minute. That one moment I could remember what it felt like for her to brush my hair, and the next be furious that she had abandoned me, that she hadn't taught me how to live in my own skin and be a girl like she was supposed to. But whose fault was that, really? Zoo's lips puckered in thought, her eyebrows knitting together as she surveyed the Everest of undergarments in front of us. She began to pluck one of every size, tossing them back toward me, until both of us were laughing ourselves silly for no reason at all. Eventually, I found what I thought might have been the right fit for me. It was hard to tell. They had all been so damn uncomfortable with the wires and pinching straps. While I changed out of my dress, Zoo happily pulled together an outfit for herself that looked like something out of a store catalog. The pink dress, white leggings beneath it, and a jean jacket that was 1 or 2 sizes too big for her. The rest of the things she found were stuffed into a flower pattern backpack I pulled down off a display for her. Now that she had found her own things, she wanted to go the whole hog and pick out things for the boys too. When I found her a new pair of tennis shoes with rosy laces, she actually wrapped her arms around my waist and hugged me, like she could squeeze the things into me. And while Zoo was not especially impressed by the pair of short black boots I found for myself in the men's section, she didn't try to force any of the ribbon flats or towering high heels on me. Zoo was in the process of neatly folding a button-down shirt she had chosen for Chubbs when I remembered something. "I'll be right back," I told her. "Wait right here, okay?" It took me a few minutes to find the aisle again. Liam and I had walked past it so quickly as we made our way toward the back of the store. I wasn't altogether sure that I hadn't imagined seeing them, but there they were. Just above the cleaning supplies, a pair of bright pink rubber gloves dangling amid a sea of traditional yellow ones. "Hey, Zoo," I called as I made my way back to her. I dangled them out in front of me and waited for her to turn around. When she did, her mouth actually fell open. She was so dazzled by her new gloves that she walked with her hands stretched out in front of her, the way a princess, examining the collection of her fine jewelry around her fingers and wrists would. I watched her curtsy and twirl in her new dress as we lapped the store, all the while her feet dancing over the evidence of what had happened at the checkout lanes. Watching her, feeling the exhilaration swelling in my chest, I couldn't say I was all that aware of the broken glass and flickering monitor displays either. We turned down the dimly lit corridor of cosmetics, and I could barely keep the grin off my face. Liam found us there a short while later, just as Zoo was tying off the braid she'd woven in my hair with a glittery hair tie. I sat on the tile, and she sat on the shelf behind me, like some fairy queen. "Magnificent," I told her, when she held a broken mirror out in front of my face. "You are incredible." And my reward for that was the feeling of her arms, bird-like bones, twinning around my neck. I twisted around so I was facing her, because I wanted to see my face. I wanted her to see my face. I wanted her to see how serious, how sincerely I meant it when I repeated myself, "You are incredible." "You two have been busy, I see." Liam leaned against the aisle's end cap, eyebrows raised. Zoo bounded toward him, scooping up the shirts and socks she'd picked for him. Thank you! Oh, God, Chubbs is going to piss his pants when he sees this. His hand came down to rest on top of her head. Geez, I leave you two alone for a little while and you clean out the joint. Good job. I pushed myself up off the floor, helping them gather up the clothes and supplies we'd managed to scrounge up. That done, we started our slow, reluctant shuffle back to the others. All three of us seemed to be aware that once we left that peaceful moment, it would be behind us forever. Zoo had only just darted out a few steps ahead of us when Liam turned to me and said, "Thanks for doing this. I'm glad you got what I meant." He gave my braid a playful tug. I just wanted to ask them a few more questions. "And you didn't want," I nodded toward Zoo, "to hear." He looked down at his feet, and when he looked back up, his ears were pink. "Yeah, but also, you were kind of distracting them." "What?" "I'm sorry I threatened them or whatever, but no, distracting them," Liam repeated, "with your face." "Oh." I recovered quickly. "Did you get anything useful out of them?" "The names of a few of the friendlier tribes, a few cities under lockdown for insurrection, stuff like that. I just wanted to get a sense of what was happening in Virginia." "I meant about the slip kid," I said, maybe a little too eagerly. "Nothing we didn't have before. Apparently everyone takes some sacred oath not to reveal more information than that. Totally ridiculous." "They really wouldn't give you any more information?" I said. Liam looked down at the ground. "Greg made us an offer, a trade, but we turned him down." "What did he want?" "What was so valuable that they wouldn't trade it for the one thing that would reunite them with their families?" "Black Betty?" "Doesn't matter," Liam said, and there was finality in his voice. "Those numbnuts manage. I'm sure we can find East River ourselves eventually." "Yeah," I said with a light laugh. "True." Out of the corner of my eye, I watched him hoist the pile of clothes onto his shoulders, his gaze never leaving where Zoo was, hopping and skipping through the field of cans and old magazines. I glanced down at a blonde movie star's face as we passed it, my eyes falling over the words, "She finally tells all," printed under her face. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," he said. "What's up?" "Why are you looking for the slip kid?" I asked. I felt his eyes on me, and I knew what explanation was coming. I mean, besides wanting to help Chubbs and Zoo get there and trying to deliver Jack's letter, is it because you want to go home? Or any reason in particular you're asking? His voice was even, testing. "The questions you were asking them about camp," I explained. "It seemed like you were trying to figure something out." Liam didn't reply for a long while, not until the tents they'd set up for the night were in sight. Even then, it wasn't an answer. "Why do you want to find the slip kid?" "Because I want to be able to see my grandmother." Because I need to understand how to control my abilities before they destroy everyone I care about. But you didn't answer my question. Zoo dashed through our tent flap, and the lantern in the tent lit up Chubb's delighted face when she handed his new things over. He folded her into an enormous hug, lifting her off her feet with the force of it. It's the same as you, he said. I just want to get home. Where's that? See, that's the funny thing, he said. It used to be North Carolina, but I'm not so sure anymore. We stood, staring at each other for a moment, nearly toe to toe, and when he lifted the flap of the tent for me, I couldn't help but wonder if he had picked up on my half-truth as easily as I had picked up on his. And that, my dear friends, is the end of chapter 15. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you tune in next time for chapter 16. I will see you soon, and have a good rest of the day or night. And this is Ruby, signing off.